Handcuffed, tattooed, and lifeless, Peter Jagger's body was pulled from the murky waters of the Vaal River in South Africa. The once feared crime boss of the terrible Josters had met a brutal end, but maybe that was inevitable. Stealing a cocaine shipment worth 1 billion South African rand from both the Colombian cartel and the Bulgarian mafia was never going to end well. How did a street hustler rise to become one of South Africa's most powerful gang leaders, only to seal his own fate with one reckless move? This is the rise and fall of the terrible Josters gang boss. Before Peter Jaggers became one of South Africa's most feared gang bosses, he was just another young man growing up in the crime-ridden streets of Cape Town. Born in the early 1980s, he was raised in a world where gangs weren't just an option, they were a way of life. Poverty, violence, and survival defined his early years. Peter Jaggers wasn't born into power, but he knew how to seize it when the opportunity arose. Growing up in the gritty streets of South Africa, he quickly learned that survival meant dominance. From a young age, he was involved in petty thefts, but it wasn't long before his ambition pushed him deeper into the world of organized crime. By his early 20s, Jaggers had caught the attention of the terrible Josters, a notorious gang known for its ruthlessness and quick expansion in the underworld. The terrible Josters maintain a significant presence across various regions in the Western Cape province of South Africa. Their influence extends to several key areas, including Halston, Delft, Kleinmond, Kreefgat, and Bontehoewel. It is believed that they have a membership of around 10,000. According to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, the terrible Josters is heavily involved in Cape Town's drug trade and the transnational trafficking of abalone, a seafood highly prized in China. His first major move came when he took control of a small drug operation in Cape Town. The previous leader, an aging member of the gang, had underestimated Jaggers' ambition and ruthlessness he was capable of. Jaggers made his mark by swiftly eliminating rivals and cutting deals with local businesses, forcing them to pay protection money. It didn't take long for Jaggers to climb the ranks. His cunning and ability to inspire fear earned him the trust of the gang's higher-ups. By the time he became the leader of the terrible Josters, Jaggers had turned the gang into a multi-million-dollar empire. His reach extended beyond South Africa with connections to international traffickers, and his rise to the top did not go unnoticed. In 2016, a Facebook post from a page associated with law enforcement in Bishop Lavis reported the arrest of a suspect in possession of an Uzi submachine gun and ammunition. The post hinted at deeper gang affiliations, stating that the individual had possible ties to the notorious 28's gang and was operating under the leadership of Peter Jaggers. Also, a 2018 Western Cape High Court judgment stated that a witness had identified Jaggers as the leader of the terrible Josters in Cape Town's Kreefgat area and the suburb of Bontehoewel. The gang expanded into new territories, taking over drug routes, extorting local businesses, and even assassinating rivals who dared to challenge him. Under his command, the terrible Josters became a force to be reckoned with, and Peter Jaggers had firmly planted himself at the top of the criminal food chain. But his rise to power came at a cost. Every move he made created more enemies that would one day come back to haunt him. At the peak of his power, Peter Jaggers was untouchable. The terrible Josters had grown from a small-time gang into an empire that controlled vast territories across South Africa and beyond. Jaggers owned not just the streets, but the minds of those who lived in fear of him. He had politicians in his pocket, cops on his payroll, and a vast network of criminals at his disposal. His empire was built on a foundation of violence, manipulation, and strategic alliances with some of the world's most dangerous criminals. High-profile crimes became his trademark: bank robberies, drug shipments, and assassinations. The police were powerless to stop him, as Jaggers had cultivated an air of invincibility, feeding off the fear he instilled in everyone. He lived a life of excess, surrounded by bodyguards and yes-men who catered to his every need. But as Jaggers' power grew, so did his paranoia. He trusted no one, even within his own organization. He isolated himself in his lavish estate, growing increasingly suspicious of those closest to him. It wasn't just the police he feared. Rivals from other gangs were starting to make moves that threatened his hold on power, but Jaggers refused to back down. He doubled down on his control, using his wealth to buy more loyalty and suppress any hint of rebellion. For a time, it seemed as though Jaggers had everything: control of the criminal underworld, unmatched power, and a lavish lifestyle to match. But even the most powerful empires eventually crumble. The first cracks in Peter Jaggers' empire were subtle, almost unnoticeable to the untamed arrogance that had kept him at the top for so long. But power has a way of eroding those who think it's permanent. It started with whispers, rumors within the terrible Josters gang. Once loyal members began to question his decisions, the gang, once a unified force under his iron grip, started to fracture. Power struggles erupted between Jaggers' top lieutenants, each one seeing an opportunity to carve out their own slice of the empire. Jaggers, consumed by paranoia, began to lash out at those he trusted the most, alienating the very people who had helped him rise. Meanwhile, law enforcement was slowly tightening its net. Investigations into the terrible Josters ramped up, and Jaggers' once impenetrable fortress began to show signs of vulnerability. The police had infiltrated his operation. It wasn't long before key members of the gang were arrested, each one turning state's witness in exchange for reduced sentences. Jaggers knew the walls were closing in, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. His old alliances with the Colombian and Bulgarian mafias, once an asset, began to unravel. Disputes over drug shipments, betrayal in business deals. Jaggers had made too many enemies, both within his own ranks and on the international stage. The beginning of the end began as follows. The Maritime Rescue Coordinating Center received a distress call from 80 miles off the coast of Simonstown, South Africa. A rescue team was dispatched, finding 6 stranded men claiming they had run out of fuel on a fishing trip. Their relieved expressions masked a dangerous secret. If their plan worked, they were about to steal a fortune in cocaine. Once ashore, one of the men discreetly contacted Peter Jaggers. He had been the trusted middleman between Colombian cartels and the Bulgarian mafia, ensuring drug shipments moved undetected. The usual process was simple. The Colombians would attach GPS trackers to sealed cocaine containers, sharing the drop location with Jaggers, who would then retrieve and deliver the cargo to the Bulgarians. But this time, Jaggers had other plans. Instead of handing over the shipment, he devised an elaborate heist. The stranded boat was a decoy, a staged mishap to mislead authorities. Meanwhile, a second boat headed straight for the drop location, securing 1,500 pounds of high-grade cocaine with a converted street value of 1 billion South African rand. It was a bold betrayal, one that would put Jaggers in direct conflict with 2 of the deadliest criminal organizations in the world. Peter Jaggers and his associate William Peterson were allegedly kidnapped after flying from Cape Town to Johannesburg in a dispute linked to a Colombian cocaine deal. Their captors reportedly demanded 50 million South African rand for their release. When their demands were unmet, they resorted to drastic measures. On Friday, the 11th of October, 2024, around 2 p.m., a passerby spotted a body floating in the Vaal Riviere, South Africa. When police divers arrived, they discovered a second body nearby. They were in a bad state of decomposition, Free State Police spokesperson Captain Lorraine Earle later confirmed. But the condition of the corpses told an even darker story. Both men had been restrained, handcuffed at the wrists, their feet tightly bound with cable ties. There was no chance of escape. One body bore several tattoos and was completely toothless. Among the inked markings was a cross with fire on the right calf and the name and date Billy August 6, 2016 scrawled across his back. The second corpse still had his teeth and featured distinct tattoos, a flame on the left leg, and across his back, the chilling words, "International Crook." The death of Peter Jaggers sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. His once dominant gang, the terrible Josters, disintegrated without his leadership. This was the story of Peter Jaggers. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel to see more of these interesting stories.